The vacuum cleaner stopped. Amara Whitfield's hands were shaking before she even understood why. She had cleaned this hanger 100 times. She knew the smell of the leather seats, the particular ache in her knees by hour 3, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed when the generator kicked in. She knew this job the way a woman knows a life she has stopped expecting to change. She did not know the man standing in the cabin doorway. Not at first. Not until the light caught his jaw, and something in her chest folded in on itself like paper. For years since she had heard that voice say her name like it was something sacred. For years since she had watched a black car pull away from a hospital parking lot and told herself, "He is gone, and he is never coming back, and you will survive this because you have no other choice." Kang Jun-ho did not move. The other cleaners kept working around her, oblivious, because to them she was nobody, a contractor, a name on a clipboard, a woman in a gray uniform who said, "Yes, sir," and "Sorry, sir," and made herself small enough to be forgiven for existing in rooms like this one. But to him, she was not nobody. To him, she was a ghost standing in a private jet with a rag in her hand, wearing a wedding ring on a chain around her neck that she thought no one could see. He saw it anyway. Amara. Her name came out of him broken, like a man remembering how to speak a language he had buried. She dropped the rag. If you have ever been the one who had to disappear so someone else could stay comfortable, if you have ever swallowed your own name because saying it out loud would have cost you everything, stay with me. Because what you are about to watch is not a reunion. It is a reckoning 4 years in the making, and by the end, you will have to decide who the real villain of this story was. Nobody in that hangar knew what the ring meant. To them, jewelry on a cleaning contractor was strange enough to gossip about later. Over cheap coffee in the break room, the kind of coffee Amara drank black, because sugar was a small luxury she had trained herself out of needing. She had trained herself out of a lot of things. For years ago, Amara Celeste Whitfield had been Amara Kang, wife of the second son of one of Seoul's most feared and most respected families, a name spoken in boardrooms with admiration and in backrooms with fear. She had married Jun-ho in a ceremony his mother did not attend, in a country his mother called beneath consideration, to a woman his mother called, in front of the entire wedding party, a mistake he will grow out of. Amara had smiled that day. She had bowed to the elders who refused to look at her. She had worn her grandmother's pearl earrings under a hairstyle a Korean stylist did not know how to work with, and she had done her own hair the night before in a hotel bathroom, crying quietly so her new husband would not hear her through the door. She did not apologize for that memory. Not then, not now. But she had spent years apologizing for everything else, for the way she laughed too loud at family dinners, for the way her cooking did not taste like his mother's, for the way she existed in rooms built for a different kind of woman entirely. She had a private fear she never said out loud, not even to Jun-ho, that she would always be tolerated and never truly wanted. For years ago, that fear had a name and a date. It was the day Madame Han Seun, matriarch of the Kang family, walked into Amara's hospital room 6 months pregnant and told her, in perfect, cold English, that her son would never inherit anything. Not the company, not the family name, not his own freedom, as long as a foreign wife with a foreign child stood beside him. "You will disappear," Madame Han had said, "or I will make sure the child disappears with you. Choose which mercy you can live with." Amara had chosen the mercy of walking away with her body intact and her daughter breathing. She never told Jun-ho the real reason. She let him believe, through a letter written in someone else's handwriting and a story fed to him by his own mother, that his wife had grown tired of the family, tired of Korea, tired of him, that she had taken money and left in the night like a woman running from a marriage she regretted. He had believed it, because grief needs somewhere to live, and a lie is easier to carry than the truth that your own mother destroyed your family with her bare hands. That was the first mistake Madame Han made. She underestimated how long love can survive on nothing but memory. Amara raised her daughter, Noelle, in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Queens, cleaning offices by day and studying bookkeeping by night, refusing every form of help that came with strings attached. Her mother had not spoken to her in 3 years, not out of cruelty, but out of a grief of her own, a mother watching her daughter fold herself smaller and smaller to survive a marriage that had cost her everything. "You keep apologizing to people who never once apologized to you," her mother told her once, over a phone call neither of them finished. "One day you're going to run out of yourself to give away." Amara kept a photograph of Noelle in her purse, tucked behind an expired Metro card, and a bracelet her late grandmother had given her, thin gold, worn smooth, on her left wrist every single day, rain or shine, rich house or poor one. It was the only inheritance she had ever been allowed to keep without someone trying to take it from her. And she kept the ring, not on her finger, that would have invited questions she did not have the strength to answer, but on a chain, against her heart, hidden beneath her uniform collar, exactly where it had been the day she buried a marriage she never chose to end. While Amara built a life out of nothing in Queens, Jun-ho built an empire out of grief. He had inherited the legitimate side, the airline logistics company, the private aviation division, the face the public was allowed to see. Marble floors that echoed. A penthouse with more rooms than memories. He had not laughed, genuinely laughed, in 4 years. His assistant, Mrs. Choi, was the only person in his employ who remembered what he used to sound like before the letter. She watched him sit alone in his office some nights, a folder of divorce paperwork he had never signed sitting untouched in the bottom drawer of his desk, because signing it would have made the lie permanent, and some quiet, stubborn part of him had never been able to do that. He was powerful. He was not free. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, his own mother scheduled a routine hangar inspection ahead of a family gala flight to Seoul, and sent him to check on the new cleaning contract personally, because appearances mattered, because everything in that family mattered except the people in it. That was how Kang Jun-ho walked into his own jet and found the wife he had been told stopped loving him, on her knees, scrubbing a floor he had walked across 1,000 times without once wondering who kept it clean. Amara. She stood slowly, wiping her palms against her uniform like the motion could erase for years. "Mr. Kang," she said, and the formality in it cut him worse than any scream could have. "I didn't know this was your hangar." "Don't," he said quiet. "Don't do that. Don't call me that. It's what I'm supposed to call you." Her voice did not shake, even though everything else in her did. "I'm contracted staff. You're a client. That's all this is." "That is not all this is," he said, and for the first time in 4 years, something in his controlled, careful voice cracked open. "You left. You left me a letter and disappeared, and I looked for you, Amara. I looked for 8 months before my mother told me to stop embarrassing the family." Amara felt something old and dangerous rise in her chest, not sadness. Fury. "I didn't leave you," she said. "I was removed. There's a difference, and you never once asked which one it was." The room between them went silent, because for the first time, Jun-ho understood that his own memory of the worst year of his life might have been built entirely out of someone else's lie. If you have ever discovered that the person you trusted most edited your own history without your permission, you already know what that silence feels like. It feels like the floor disappearing under you in a room you thought you knew by heart. He asked her to sit. She refused, at first, out of pride, out of 4 years of learning that sitting across from powerful people rarely ended well for her. But something in the way he said please, a word she had never once heard him use with his own family, made her lower herself into the leather seat across from him. "Tell me," he said. "All of it. I am not asking you to forgive me for what I don't understand yet. I am asking you to let me understand it." So she told him. She told him about his mother's visit to the hospital room, about the threat wrapped in the language of mercy, about signing papers she barely remembers signing because her hands would not stop shaking, about a driver who took her to the airport instead of home, about a check she never cashed because cashing it would have meant admitting she had been bought. She told him about Noelle, his daughter, 3 years old, a girl with her mother's stubborn jaw and, according to a photograph Amara finally pulled from her purse with trembling fingers, her father's exact eyes. Jun-ho did not speak for a long time. He held the photograph the way a man holds something he is afraid will disappear if he breathes wrong. "I am not asking why you didn't fight back," he finally said. I am asking how long you have been forced to survive people mistaking your silence for permission. Since the day I married into your family, Amara said. Your mother taught me that lesson before the wedding cake was even cut. That was the moment the story stopped being about a shocking reunion and became something heavier, a reckoning that had been waiting 4 years to happen. Over the following weeks, something careful and unhurried began to grow between them again. Not romance rushed back into place like nothing had happened, but two wounded people relearning each other from the ground up. He did not offer her charity. He offered her work, real work, overseeing quality control for the private aviation division, a job she was overqualified for and had never been given the chance to prove. She did not ask him for money. She taught him, without meaning to, how to sit in silence with someone without needing to fix it, a skill his family had never modeled for him. One evening, after a stretch of turbulence in a strategy meeting where a board member had made a thinly veiled comment about optics and certain hires, Jun-ho found Amara in the hangar break room, eating a sandwich alone. He sat down across from her without asking. You haven't eaten since this morning, she said, sliding half of her sandwich toward him without looking up. I noticed. You get quieter when you're hungry. You always did. He stared at the sandwich like it was the first honest thing anyone had given him in years. You remember that, he said. I remember everything, she said. That was always the problem. You got to forget. I didn't have that luxury. His phone buzzed on the table between them. He didn't need to look at it to know who it was, his mother's assistant, again, asking when he'd be done with the inspection detour. He turned the phone face down without answering it. Amara watched him do it and said nothing. But something in her chest loosened slightly, just enough to notice. That night, in the car, after she finally allowed herself to cry for the first time in front of him in 4 years, he told her something he had never told another living person. When I was 9, he said, my father sent me to boarding school in Switzerland for 2 years, because my mother said a Kang's son should learn discipline before affection. I used to save half my dinner every night and hide it in my desk drawer, because I was afraid one day they would stop feeding me and I wanted to be prepared. I was 9 years old, planning for a hunger that never technically happened. I have been protecting myself from being unwanted my entire life. And I still married a woman my mother could use against me anyway. Amara reached over and took his hand. She did not say it was okay. She did not say anything at all. And that, for the first time in his adult life, felt like enough. The ring around her neck pressed warm against her collarbone that night. The same ring he had placed on her finger in a ceremony his own mother refused to attend. It had traveled with her through every version of survival she had built since. Now it sat between them again, small, quiet, and enormous. But peace like that never survives a family like the Kangs undisturbed for long. Madame Han-sin discovered the truth 3 weeks later, not through confession, but through a photograph. Jun-ho and Amara at the airfield, laughing, actually laughing, captured by a rival executive hungry for leverage. She summoned her son to the family estate that same night. You will end this, Madame Han said, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. I did not remove that woman from your life, so you could crawl back to her like a starving dog. You didn't remove her, Jun-ho said, his voice dangerously calm. You erased her. There's a difference, mother, and I finally understand what it is. Madame Han's eyes went cold in a way that had frightened boardrooms for 30 years. That woman was never going to survive in this family. I gave her the mercy of a clean exit instead of a slow humiliation. You should be thanking me. She has a daughter, Jun-ho said. My daughter. Your granddaughter. Do you understand what you took from all 3 of us? For the briefest moment, something flickered behind Madame Han's composure. Not guilt, exactly, but something adjacent to it, something buried under 30 years of believing that cruelty, applied precisely, was simply the family business. That crack would matter later. But not yet. The door opened before either of them could say anything else. Taemin stepped in, unhurried, the way a man walks when he already believes he owns the outcome of a room. He had heard enough from the hallway to know exactly how to use it. Little brother playing house with the help, he said, in Korean, then switched to English so Amara would understand every word of it. Do you know what the board will say when they hear the Kang name is tied to a scandal like this? Weakness. That's what they'll call it. And weakness gets other men killed in our business. Our business is aviation logistics, Jun-ho said, flat. Our business, Tae-min said, has never only been aviation logistics, and you know it. You've spent 4 years pretending you run the clean half of this family, so you don't have to look at what the rest of us do to keep it standing. Don't lecture me about weakness while you're falling apart over a woman mother already dealt with once. Amara did not flinch. She had spent 4 years being spoken about as though she weren't in the room, and she had run out of patience for it long before this particular brother arrived. You can discuss me in the third person all you like, she said, stepping forward. But I'd remind you that the woman you're calling to help just heard you admit, out loud, in front of a witness, that this family's business is not what it claims to be on paper. I wonder how the board would feel about that. For the first time, Tae-min's composure slipped. It was small, a tightening around the eyes, nothing more, but it was enough for Jun-ho to see, clearly, which of the two people in that room had actually learned to survive on nothing but instinct. What Jun-ho didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that Amara's own mother, the woman who had gone silent for 3 years, had never actually stopped watching from a distance. She had kept records, bank transfers with Madame Han's signature, a recorded phone call from the week of the disappearance, in which a family lawyer discussed relocation logistics for a woman who was never told she was being relocated at all. Amara's mother had kept the truth locked away not out of coldness, but out of fear that using it too early would only get her daughter hurt worse. She had been waiting, silently, for the right moment to hand her daughter a weapon instead of a wound. That was the twist that would change everything. The woman who seemed to have abandoned Amara in her lowest moment had actually been building her defense the entire time. But before that truth could surface, the story had to get worse before it got better. Tae-min, Jun-ho's older brother, saw an opportunity in the chaos. He had spent his whole life proving his loyalty to their mother by becoming exactly the kind of man she respected, ruthless, efficient, incapable of being embarrassed by sentiment. He leaked the story to a rival syndicate family the Kangs were mid-negotiation with, framing Jun-ho's reunion with Amara as instability, as a liability, as proof that the reasonable brother could not be trusted to keep his personal life from threatening billions in shipping contracts. It worked exactly as he intended. The rival family demanded Jun-ho publicly distance himself from the American woman before signing any further agreements. And Jun-ho, cornered, exhausted, still more his mother's son than he wanted to admit, hesitated. He did not choose Amara instantly. He asked for time. He asked her to stay quiet, to stay out of sight, just for a few weeks, while he handled the negotiation. That hesitation broke something in her that 4 years of hardship had not managed to break. You protected my body once, Amara told him, standing in the doorway of the penthouse she had never wanted to live in, the ring back around her neck instead of on her hand, where she had briefly, foolishly, let herself imagine it belonging again. But you never once protected my dignity. You are asking me to disappear again, Jun-ho. Softer this time. Kinder wording. But it is the exact same request your mother made 4 years ago. That is not what I meant. You did not save me, she said, and her voice did not rise, but it did not waver either. You moved me like another piece on your board, the same as she did. The difference is she was honest about it. She left that night. Not back to Queens. She was done running to smaller and smaller spaces to make herself easier to forgive, but to a hotel, with her daughter, with the photograph, with the bracelet, with nothing but her name and her spine. Jun-ho spent the following week in a silence even his staff found unbearable. It was Mrs. Choi, of all people, who finally said the thing no one in that family had dared say to him directly in 30 years. Sir, she said, setting down a cup of tea he had not touched, your mother taught you that love is a weakness that gets exploited. But I have worked for this family since before you were born, and I have never once seen her happy, not on her wedding day, not at either of her sons' births, not once. You are about to make the same trade she made. Power for peace. I am telling you now, because no one else will. It is not a good trade. That night, Jun-ho opened the bottom drawer of his desk and finally looked at the unsigned divorce papers he had carried for 4 years like a wound he refused to let heal properly. He tore them, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time, cried the way his mother had taught him a Kang man should never cry. Completely, without controlling it, without performing restraint for an audience that wasn't even in the room. The public confrontation came at the very negotiation dinner Tae-min had engineered to force Jun-ho's hand. A formal gala at the family's hotel, rival executives, and Madame Han, and half of Seoul's business elite gathered under one roof. The exact kind of room that had never once been built with women like Amara in mind. Amara walked in uninvited, in a dress she had bought with her own money, the bracelet on her wrist, the ring finally back on her finger where it belonged, Noelle's photograph tucked into a small clutch bag, instead of hidden behind an expired Metro card. The room went quiet, because everyone understood, in an instant, exactly who she was and exactly what her presence meant. Madame Han rose first. "This is a private business event. I know exactly what this is," Amara said, and her voice carried across the ballroom without a single tremor in it. "This is the room where you decide who gets to be worthy of dignity and who gets erased for convenience. I have stood outside rooms like this one for 4 years believing I deserved to be erased. I do not believe that anymore." She turned, not to Jun-ho, but to the rival family patriarch watching with sharp, calculating interest. "You were told I am a liability," she said. "I am not the liability in this family. The liability is a matriarch who threatened a pregnant woman in a hospital bed, forged a paper trail, and has spent 30 years mistaking control for love. I have the recordings and the bank transfers to prove every word of it, and I am prepared to make all of it public tonight, in this room, unless the truth is finally spoken by the people who owe it to everyone standing here." Madame Han's face drained of color. Tae-min's smirk faltered for the first time in the story. "I am not standing here because he chose me," Amara continued, finally looking at Jun-ho, who had not moved, who looked at her like a man watching the only steady thing in his life reassemble itself in real time. "I am standing here because I finally chose myself. Whatever happens after tonight, that part does not change." The room stayed silent for a long, unbearable moment. Then Madame Han did something no one in that family had seen her do in 3 decades. She sat down, slowly, and said, quietly enough that only the people closest to her could hear, "Enough. She's told the truth. I will not have this family's name built on a lie in front of these people." It was not an apology. It would take much longer, and much more, for that to come. But it was the first crack in 30 years of armor. And sometimes the first crack is the only proof that something can eventually break open. Jun-ho crossed the room and stood beside Amara. Not in front of her, not speaking over her, but beside her, exactly where he should have stood 4 years earlier. "She is my wife," he said, loud enough for every executive, every rival, every relative in that room to hear. "She has always been my wife. The only mistake was ever allowing anyone to convince me otherwise." In the weeks that followed, the truth did what truth usually does when it is finally allowed into the light. It moved slowly, imperfectly, and cost something real from everyone involved. Tae-min lost his position within the family's inner circle, not out of vengeance, but because loyalty built on cruelty eventually collapses under its own weight. Madame Han did not transform overnight into a warm, doting grandmother. She began, haltingly, learning to sit in the same room as Noelle without flinching at what the child represented, a mixed, unapologetic future she had once tried to erase. Amara's own mother finally flew out to meet her granddaughter for the first time, carrying 3 years of unspoken guilt and a folder of evidence she had kept safe out of love disguised as distance. And Amara herself did not simply slide back into the life that had once tried to make her disappear. She kept her job. She kept her name, both of them, the one she was born with and the one she had married into, because she had learned that a woman does not have to choose between who she was and who she became. She kept the bracelet. She kept the ring, finally worn openly instead of hidden beneath a collar. And she kept the boundary she had drawn in that ballroom, The one that said, clearly, that love without respect is just another elegant form of erasure. This was never really a story about a powerful man rescuing a woman from a cleaning uniform. It was about what happens when a woman who spent her whole life being asked to shrink finally decides that survival was never the same thing as being small. It was about a man who had to lose the woman he loved twice before he understood that protecting someone's body means nothing if you are unwilling to protect their dignity in the same breath. And it was about a family that had mistaken control for love for 3 generations, finally forced to ask itself, who actually paid the price for that mistake? So here is the question I want you to sit with before you go. Was Jun-ho's silence at that negotiation dinner a betrayal? Or was it simply a man still learning how to choose differently than the family that raised him? Would you have forgiven the hesitation? Or would you have walked away for good the way Amara almost did? Drop your city, your local time, and one word for how this story made you feel. I read every single comment, and your reactions genuinely shape which story I tell next. If Amara's strength moved you tonight, like this video, subscribe, and tell me which line stayed with you longest. I'll see you in the next one.